The night was alive with the sound of clinking glasses and soft laughter as Nathan Caldwell, a self-made billionaire, leaned against the marble railing of his penthouse balcony. Below, the city stretched endlessly, its shimmering lights reflecting in the dark glass of the high-rise buildings. He was at the peak of his power, untouchable, indifferent, and convinced that money could solve anything. Nothing challenged him anymore. Until tonight. "Nathan, you always claim you can turn anyone into high society material," Michael Sterling, his oldest rival, said with a smirk, swirling his whiskey. "I bet you wouldn't last 3 months married to someone undesirable." Nathan arched a brow, intrigued. "Define undesirable." Michael gestured lazily toward the street below, where a woman sat on the cold pavement, her arms wrapped around herself against the biting night air. Her clothes were threadbare, her hair tangled, and her face obscured by shadows. "Her," Michael said. "Marry her. Turn her into a lady. Keep her at your side for 3 months. If you do, I'll transfer $5 million to your account." Nathan let out a low chuckle. $5 million? You must really doubt me. I do. You lack the patience, the commitment. You're all money, no heart. Nathan downed the rest of his drink and set the glass aside, his lips curling into a confident smile. "You underestimate me, Michael. I accept your bet." Without another word, he strode toward the elevator, descending to the street where his new wife awaited, unaware that her world was about to change forever. Nathan stepped onto the cold pavement, the rhythmic hum of the city fading as he focused on the woman before him. She sat hunched against the wall, her arms wrapped around her thin frame for warmth. A small cardboard sign lay beside her, "Anything helps." She didn't look up when he approached. Her fingers clutched an old coffee cup with a few coins rattling inside. Nathan cleared his throat, his voice smooth but firm. "Excuse me." Slowly, she lifted her head, revealing tired, wary eyes, eyes that had seen too much. She looked younger than he expected, yet burdened by years of hardship. "If you're just here to throw pity money at me, keep walking," she said, her voice hoarse from the cold. Nathan smirked. "I'm here to offer you something better." She scoffed. "Yeah. Like what?" "A lecture on how I should pull myself up by my bootstraps." "No," he replied coolly, kneeling to her level. "A deal. Marry me. 3 months. In exchange, you'll have a place to live, food, clothes, and when it's over, you'll walk away with $5 million. She stared at him, unblinking, before laughing, a bitter, hollow sound. "This is a joke, right? Some twisted rich guy prank?" "I'm very serious." His tone left no room for doubt. She studied him, searching for the trick, the catch. "Why me?" Nathan's smile was calculated. "Because you're here. Because you need this." Her jaw tightened. "And what do you get out of it?" Nathan hesitated for the briefest moment before replying, "Let's just say. I enjoy a challenge." She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "This is insane." "Yes," he agreed. "But it's also the best offer you'll ever get." A long silence stretched between them, the distant chatter of the city buzzing in the background. She looked down at her trembling hands, then back up at him. "My name is Sky," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan extended his hand, his confidence unwavering. "Then, Sky, let's make a deal." She hesitated, then took it. Sky sat stiffly in the back seat of Nathan's sleek black car, her fingers gripping the fabric of her worn-out hoodie. The leather interior was warm, the scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. She felt wildly out of place. Nathan, on the other hand, was the picture of ease, typing away on his phone as if he hadn't just plucked a homeless woman off the street and proposed marriage. "You haven't asked me why," Sky muttered, staring out the window as the city blurred past. Nathan glanced up. "Why what?" "Why I'm on the streets." Why I don't have a job. Why I might not be some insane person who's about to rob you the second we stop. He smirked. I don't make deals without assessing the risk. You're not insane. You're desperate. She clenched her jaw. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. His voice was maddeningly calm. And I know you're about to step into a world where people will expect you to be someone else. Can you handle that? Skye turned to face him fully, eyes blazing. I've handled worse. Nathan studied her, intrigued. There was fire beneath the exhaustion, a sharpness in her words that told him she wasn't just some lost soul, she was someone who had fought to survive. The car pulled into the entrance of a five-star hotel, where a doorman in a pristine uniform rushed to open Nathan's door. Skye hesitated, gripping the handle. You can still walk away, Nathan said. But that means walking back to that sidewalk. That empty cup. Her fingers tightened. He's testing me. She squared her shoulders and stepped out, the icy wind cutting through her thin clothes. The hotel lobby was a sea of marble, crystal chandeliers, and guests draped in designer labels. She felt their eyes on her. Judging. Whispering. Nathan walked beside her, unfazed. At the front desk, he spoke to the receptionist without so much as glancing at Skye. I need a suite. Make sure there are fresh clothes sent up immediately. Of course, Mr. Caldwell, the receptionist said with an eager smile. As Nathan turned back toward her, Skye's stomach tightened. She had agreed to this, but suddenly, the reality of what she'd done crashed over her. She wasn't just stepping into a hotel. She was stepping into his world. And she had no idea if she'd survive it. Skye stood in the center of the opulent hotel suite, feeling the thick carpet beneath her battered sneakers. The chandelier above cast golden light over furniture that probably cost more than everything she'd ever owned combined. She crossed her arms, suddenly hyper-aware of how out of place she looked. Nathan, however, moved through the space like he belonged, because he did. You'll shower, he said, tossing a keycard onto the marble counter. Then, you'll find clean clothes waiting for you in the closet. After that, we'll discuss the contract. She scoffed, hugging herself. So that's it. Just like that, I'm supposed to become someone else. Nathan tilted his head slightly, watching her. No. You're supposed to pretend to be someone else. For 3 months. Skye exhaled, her nails digging into her arms. She wanted to argue, to challenge him, but the thought of going back to the street stopped her. Instead, she walked toward the bathroom, slamming the door behind her. As she turned on the shower, steam quickly filled the room. She peeled off her ragged clothes and stepped under the water, the heat shocking her skin. It had been so long since she'd felt truly clean. As the dirt and grime washed away, she stared at her reflection in the fogged mirror. Without the layers of struggle, she almost looked like a different person. Was that what Nathan saw? Someone he could mold into his perfect illusion. After the shower, she found a set of neatly folded clothes, a silk blouse, fitted slacks, and undergarments that actually fit. She dressed hesitantly, feeling the smooth fabric against her skin. It felt foreign. Unfamiliar. When she stepped back into the suite, Nathan was seated on the couch, a folder open on the coffee table. He looked up, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. You clean up well, he said with a smirk. Skye rolled her eyes but said nothing as she sank onto the couch opposite him. Nathan slid the folder toward her. Read it carefully. Everything is spelled out, 3 months of marriage, public appearances, and in return, $5 million in a secured account under your name. She flipped through the pages, skimming over legal jargon. And what happens if I leave early? You forfeit the money. She clicked her tongue. Figures. Nathan leaned forward, his fingers steepled. I don't care what you do after this, Skye. You could disappear forever for all I care. But until then, you play the role. No exceptions. She tapped the pen against the contract, staring at his piercing gaze. 3 months. A lifetime of money. And all she had to do was survive him. Skye inhaled sharply, then signed. Nathan's smirk widened. Congratulations, Mrs. Caldwell. The wedding was soulless, a mere exchange of vows in a cold courthouse, witnessed only by Nathan's lawyer and a bored officiant. There were no flowers, no guests, no romance. Just signatures on paper, sealing a deal rather than a union. Skye stood in a borrowed designer dress, the silky fabric clinging to her body in a way that felt unnatural. Nathan, ever the polished billionaire, looked effortlessly composed in a tailored suit. Do you, Nathan Caldwell, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, he said smoothly, without hesitation. Skye's fingers twitched at her side. And do you, Skye Miller, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? A moment of silence. She swallowed hard. 3 months. $5 million. She could do this. I do, she said, forcing the words past her lips. The officiant barely looked up as he muttered, by the power vested in me. And just like that, it was done. Nathan slipped a ring onto her finger, not because it meant anything, but because it had to look real. Skye stared at the diamond, its weight unfamiliar, suffocating. As they stepped out of the courthouse, Nathan's driver was already waiting. He opened the door to a sleek black car, but before Skye could slide inside, Nathan stopped her with a firm hand on her lower back. Smile, he murmured under his breath. She frowned but quickly realized why. Paparazzi. A small group of photographers had gathered, cameras flashing. The world loved a billionaire scandal, and Nathan Caldwell suddenly marrying an unknown woman was pure gossip gold. With a sharp inhale, Skye forced a dazzling smile, playing her part. Nathan, ever the professional, pulled her close as if they were actually in love. The way his arm rested against her waist sent an unexpected shiver through her body. Click. 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 Headlines would explode by morning. Once inside the car, the door shut behind them, silencing the chaos. You'll get used to that, Nathan said, scrolling through his phone. Skye stared at him, jaw tight. Will I? He glanced at her then, something unreadable in his eyes. You'll have to. As the car pulled away from the courthouse, the reality of her decision sank in. She had just married a man she barely knew. And the hardest part was yet to come. Nathan's mansion was a palace. As the iron gates opened, revealing the sprawling estate, Skye felt her breath hitch. It wasn't just big, it was obscene. The driveway stretched endlessly, flanked by manicured gardens that looked too perfect to be real. Towering white columns framed the entrance, and the sheer number of windows made her stomach twist. She was stepping into a world she didn't belong in. The car rolled to a stop, and before she could brace herself, Nathan was already stepping out. A uniformed butler opened her door, offering a polite nod. Mrs. Caldwell, welcome. The title made her skin crawl. Skye hesitated before stepping out, her cheap sneakers hitting the polished stone steps. As soon as she did, she felt eyes on her, staff members lined up neatly, waiting for instruction. Maids, chefs, assistants, all here to serve him. Nathan barely acknowledged them. Ensure my wife is comfortable, he said coolly, adjusting the cuffs of his suit. She'll need a proper wardrobe by the end of the week. One of the maids, an older woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward. Of course, sir. Skye gritted her teeth. His wife. She wasn't used to people looking at her like this, like a stray dog that had somehow wandered into a museum. Nathan glanced at her. Come. I'll show you to your room. She followed him inside, hating how easily he moved through all this wealth. The grand entrance hall was ridiculous, gold-trimmed walls, a chandelier that looked bigger than her entire childhood apartment, and a sweeping staircase that led to what she assumed were dozens of rooms. "This is your new life," Nathan said as they climbed the stairs. "I suggest you get used to it quickly." Sky exhaled sharply. "Right. Because that's easy." He stopped in front of a door and pushed it open, revealing a massive bedroom. It was bigger than any place she'd ever lived, huge windows, a king-sized bed, and a walk-in closet that could probably fit an entire family. "This is where you'll stay," Nathan said. "My room is down the hall." Sky raised an eyebrow. "Separate rooms? What will people think?" Nathan smirked. "They'll think what I want them to think." Before she could respond, he turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "Dinner is at 7. Be ready." Then he was gone. Sky stared after him, her stomach twisting. She had stepped into his world. And she wasn't sure if she would survive it. Dinner was a test. Sky knew it the second she stepped into the dining room. The table was ridiculously long, lined with flickering candles and dishes that looked too fancy to eat. Nathan sat at one end, a glass of wine in hand, watching her. She hesitated before sitting at the opposite end, the sheer distance between them making it clear, this wasn't a marriage. This was a performance. "You're late," Nathan said smoothly, swirling his wine. Sky crossed her arms. "I didn't realize I was on a schedule." "You are now." His gaze flickered over her. "At least you look presentable." She clenched her jaw. The dress she was wearing, a deep blue silk gown, had been delivered to her room, along with heels she had nearly broken her ankle trying to walk in. The whole thing felt like a costume. The butler served dinner, silver trays unveiling an elaborate meal. Sky stared at the artfully plated dish, resisting the urge to snort. "You expect me to eat this?" she asked. "Where's the real food?" Nathan smirked, taking a bite. "You'll get used to it." Sky stabbed at the food with her fork, resisting the urge to launch it at his smug face. The tension between them thickened with every passing second. Then, Nathan leaned back in his chair. "Tomorrow, your training begins." She frowned. "Training?" He gestured vaguely. "Manners, etiquette, social skills. You need to learn how to be my wife." Sky's grip tightened around her fork. "I thought I just had to pretend to be your wife." "And what do you think that requires?" His eyes locked onto hers. "People will be watching us, Sky. Every word, every movement will be scrutinized. You can't afford to slip." She scoffed. "So, what? You're turning me into some high society puppet?" Nathan's smirk didn't waver. "I'm turning you into someone who can survive in my world." Something about the way he said it made her stomach tighten. Sky placed her fork down carefully, meeting his gaze head-on. "I've survived worse than this, Nathan. Your world doesn't scare me." A flicker of something crossed his expression, interest, amusement, respect, but it was gone in an instant. "We'll see," he murmured, finishing his wine. Sky clenched her fists under the table. This was a game to him. But he was about to find out, she played to win. The next morning, Sky was rudely awakened by a knock at her door, loud, sharp, and completely unnecessary. She groaned, pulling the blanket over her head. "Go away." The door opened anyway. "Get up," Nathan's voice was annoyingly calm. "Your training starts now." Sky peeked out from under the blanket to glare at him. He was already dressed in a crisp black suit, looking like he had never experienced exhaustion a day in his life. "I'm not a dog you can train, Nathan," she muttered, sitting up. "No, but you're a woman who agreed to play a role. So get dressed and meet me downstairs." His gaze flickered over her, amused. "Unless you'd rather do your etiquette lessons in pajamas?" Sky resisted the urge to throw a pillow at him. Instead, she dragged herself out of bed, muttering curses under her breath. By the time she made it downstairs, dressed, but miserable, she was greeted by an older woman with sharp eyes and a posture so perfect it made Sky's spine hurt just looking at her. "This is Vivian," Nathan said. "She'll be teaching you how to survive in high society." Vivian gave Sky a once-over and sighed. "This will be a challenge." Sky forced a smile. "Thrilled to be here." The next few hours were hell. Walking lessons. Sitting lessons. Even talking lessons. Vivian corrected every move Sky made, every glance, every word. "Stop slouching," she snapped. "I'm not slouching," Sky argued. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you call that? Resting?" Nathan, who had been observing from the corner of the room, actually laughed. It was the first genuine sound she had heard from him, and for some reason, it threw her off. "Don't encourage her, Mr. Caldwell," Vivian warned. Sky smirked. "Yeah, don't encourage me, Mr. Caldwell." Nathan's amusement faded just as quickly as it had come. "Try to take this seriously, Sky. There's an event next week, and I expect you to be flawless." Sky crossed her arms. "And if I'm not?" Nathan stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Then people will start asking questions. And if they dig too deep, you lose." The challenge was clear. Sky wasn't just learning to survive his world, she was learning to outplay him in it. The night of the gala arrived too soon. Sky stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. The transformation was undeniable. The deep emerald gown hugged her figure perfectly, the silk cascading down to the floor. Her hair, once tangled and lifeless, was styled in soft waves. A delicate diamond necklace, Nathan's choice, rested against her collarbone, glistening under the soft lighting. She looked expensive. But the truth was, she felt like a fraud. A knock at the door snapped her out of her thoughts. "Come in," she said, adjusting the bracelet on her wrist. Nathan stepped inside, dressed in a flawless black tuxedo. His sharp gaze scanned her from head to toe, and for the first time, he didn't have a snide remark. Instead, he simply said, "You're ready." Sky folded her arms, raising an eyebrow. That almost sounded like a compliment. Nathan smirked, stepping closer. "Don't let it go to your head." She held his gaze. "Oh, don't worry. You do a great job of keeping me humble." Nathan chuckled under his breath before offering his arm. "Shall we?" Sky hesitated for half a second before looping her hand through his. It was just for show. Just for the cameras. So why did her pulse quicken when his fingers brushed against hers? The moment they stepped into the ballroom, eyes turned. The murmurs started instantly. Whispers. Speculation. Judgment. "Who is she? I heard she came out of nowhere. She doesn't belong here." Sky kept her posture straight, keeping Vivian's voice in her head. "Shoulders back. Chin up. Own the room." Nathan leaned down, his breath warm against her ear. "Relax. You're doing fine." She exhaled slowly, forcing a smile. "Easy for you to say. You were born into this." Nathan turned to her, something flickering in his expression. "You think this world is easy?" Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the crowd. "Ah, Nathan. And his mysterious new wife. Michael. The man responsible for the bet." Sky's grip on Nathan's arm tightened. "Showtime." Michael's smirk was razor-sharp as he approached, his whiskey glass swirling lazily in his hand. "You clean up well, Sky," he said, his tone dripping with amusement. Sky met his gaze head-on, refusing to flinch. "Thanks, Michael. I'd say the same about you, but I don't like to lie." A few subtle gasps rippled through the nearby guests. Michael let out a low chuckle. Fiery. I can see why you picked her, Nathan. But tell me, his eyes gleamed with amusement as they flickered between them, how long do you think she'll last? Sky's stomach twisted. He was testing her. Nathan, who had been eerily silent, finally spoke. His voice was smooth, controlled. Dangerous. Longer than you think. Michael's smirk didn't fade, but something in his expression shifted. He took a slow sip of his drink. Well then, let's hope she surprises me. With that, he walked away, blending back into the sea of socialites. Sky exhaled, feeling the tension still coiled in her body. I hate that guy. Nathan hummed in agreement. The feeling's mutual. She turned to face him, lowering her voice. He knows, doesn't he? Nathan's jaw tensed. He suspects. Her stomach clenched. And if he finds out about the bet? He won't. Nathan's voice was sharp. Final. But something about the way he avoided her gaze made her uneasy. For the rest of the evening, Sky played her part flawlessly. She smiled, she charmed, she became the woman Nathan needed her to be. But inside, she was battling something she didn't expect, doubt. Not in herself. But in him. That night, back at the mansion, Sky paced her room, her thoughts tangled in knots. The evening had been a success, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, as she passed Nathan's study, she heard voices. She froze. Michael's voice, low, mocking. Nathan's reply, clipped, defensive. And then, the words that made Sky's blood run cold. She'll find out, Nathan. You can't keep the bet a secret forever. Sky's breath hitched. Her world tilted. The walls she had started lowering around Nathan. Gone. Heart pounding, she backed away, her hands trembling. He had lied. She had been nothing but a game to him. And suddenly, the thought of staying in this mansion, staying with him, was unbearable. Sky turned on her heel and ran. She didn't know where she was going. All she knew was, she had to get away.